Hey. This year has been extremely exciting with so many high-level tournaments, but it's now time for the most important one of the year. Welcome everybody to the Osumania 4 Key World Cup Recap. I'm your host, once again, SunApple, alongside my good buddy Dynascape, and we'll be here every week to give you a little bit of a recap for every round of the tournament, starting off with qualifiers. Since there have been no matches this week, Dy and I will be highlighting a few teams that stood out to us, with the help of some other members in the community. But without further ado, I'll be letting the Scape take the first team.
Before we get into the teams that have qualified for the bracket stage, I'd like to highlight one borderline team that just barely missed the mark. Uruguay had the unfortunate distinction of being the 33rd seeded team last year, and yet again came close to making history, finishing 34th in this year's edition of the Mania World Cup qualifiers. It's not that this country is weak by any means. Team members such as Eterna and Osu and Rushax are certainly strong players that showed they can put up scores that rival many of the other mid to low seeded teams. It's just that the breadth and depth required of a country in each skill set is already so high, and the bar gets raised every year as countries develop their talents even further. I'm sure a fire has been lit underneath many of the teams that were so close to greatness, so here's to hoping that we'll get to see new faces like Uruguay make it to the main stage next year.
The Middle East is extremely underrepresented in terms of Osumania. Generally, the region fields about 1 to 2 teams every year, most of which do not make it past qualifiers, and this is even with them having a pretty sizable tournament scene as a result of the yearly Middle East 4K Mania Cup. The next team on our list, however, has fought through that curse, and not only fielded a roster for the first time ever, but also qualified at Seed 26. If it wasn't obvious already, of course I am talking about Team Qatar. Mostly off the back of the heroics from Char Undertale, more commonly known as Yuma OS, this team has squeezed its way into the tournament, thanks to the strong scores on Rice maps, with their highest placing being on Rice 3 at number 16. This team full of push players does have a lot to make up for, especially as they have to fight their way through the early game against a Canadian team that is so strong early on. But no matter the result, I am so excited to watch this team, especially after being able to show the world that the Middle East can make it to the big leagues.
Much like the previously mentioned Qatar, Portugal is a team that didn't even field a roster last year, but have now found themselves in the fray. After being near the bottom of the pack in the other years they've tried out, this globe definitely packed a punch with the team solidly rooted at Seed 25. The standout performance in the qualifier weekend begs the question, what did they do to comfortably get in this year? Well, for starters, Portugal was massively consistent across the board, punching above their seeding in 4 of the 7 qualifier maps, and not having any single map below 30th place is not something you'll see all too often with teams in the bottom 8 slots. The other reason is their utilization of almost everyone on their roster. Mainstay Yuta paved the way on every single qualifier, while the other members of the Portugal team, such as the team captain Sunika, picked up a couple of maps each based on their skill sets to create something greater than the sum of their parts. This is a lineup that could very well go toe-to-toe with half of the teams out there. But first, they're tested with a tough matchup this weekend, facing podium veterans Thailand.
Typically, Finland is an ever-changing team, with new players being rostered to fill in the gaps by the old ones. This year has been a bit of a change-up from the norm though, and it seems to have been for the better. While they have fielded a few new players, replacing Ire Fisu and playing Eterna with Fireball and Wahe, surprisingly enough, neither of the newbies actually played in qualifiers. Instead, the core of Kulaipora and Tomsku, with the subs of Scratchy and Ilya depending on the maps. This team has found a way to improve faster than everyone else in the tournament, skyrocketing from 30th last year all the way up to 22nd. Honestly, I don't know what these players have unlocked, but I think it's a really good sign for the Finland team, if they can continue this improvement. But before we move on to the next team, I want to introduce our 2 guests, Sparky and Epic Man 2. I'll hand y'all over to Sparky first to introduce herself and talk about a team who's also improved so much in the past year.
Hey, thanks for that introduction, guys. Hello, everybody. My name, as mentioned before, is Sparky, one of your commentators for the 4Key Mania World Cup, and I'm here to talk about a team that's personally near and dear to my heart and has shown considerable improvement this year in Mexico. A team that re-entered the fray back in 2023 after a 2-year hiatus, Mexico has historically been a lower half of the bracket team that has been good enough to get into the mix, but not do too much damage once they're in there. A team that has had really strong individual players over the years, but has always seemed to lack that solid team consistency across the board that we typically see from higher seeded squads. That could potentially change this year after a big squad revamp, with heavy-hitting veterans like Senzawa and the current Mexican Mania Oceania tournament champion Dark Echise stepping back into the spotlight. This will also be Miai's World Cup debut, who had a strong 4th place finish in that very same tournament and will look to give the squad the balance they need to break a trifecta of 1 and 2 tournament runs. These three, along with returning squad members Happer Gamer, My Angel Brandy, and NeuroY, have already delivered positive results, qualifying for this year's edition of the World Cup in 15th, their highest position in the bracket era. However, it will be their opening match against Spain where we will truly see if this year's squad has what it takes to get past that 1 and 2 hurdle and set themselves up for a deeper tournament run, as well as potentially marking their place as a dark horse in this year's World Cup bracket. All in all, before I throw it over to our next special guest, I look forward to seeing what this team can do and what kind of performances they'll be able to give us this year. To them, I'll say buena suerte, and to everybody else, I'll catch you all later.
Hello, I am Epic Man2, and I'll be covering this next section. We had numerous teams improving over the years, especially heading into the Big 26, but I don't think anyone could have expected Australia to take Seed 11 when this year already looked well stacked, right? With an overhaul to the roster, Rain is the only returning player from 2025's lineup, with the likes of Oct4, Ruka, and Emptiness returning, and 2 promising newcomers joined this time around, being SDKL and Calv, who round out the Australian roster and whom I'd like to talk about. Despite being new to tournaments, they have proven to be promising allies of the team through their performances, which led to them becoming finalists in other high difficulty tournaments, such as the Catium Cup and the Australian-New Zealand Nationals in late 2025 individually. As for the rest, Oct4 remains the all-rounded captain and still has fuel to burn based on performances from just a summer tournament, while Ruka and Rain also played in the same Australian Nationals last year to good avail, showcasing individual strengths and capabilities. Emptiness looks to fill the remainder of the void within early games, being on Rice accuracy to round out the team's flexibility across the tournament. You can gather from the teams as qualifiers that the team scores are generally a lot more consistent across each category, accentuated by the efforts of SDKL and Calv in order to tighten team scores on every stage and keep anything above 900k score as much as possible. The highlights being on Rice accuracy, Jack hybrids, long note coordination, and raw skill stamina. All in all, the Australians have really tightened up on their overall team balance while proving they can sharpshoot for some of their best World Cup runs since 2014, so I wish them the best of luck going into this edition.
Many teams fluctuate between their seedings from year to year, but one team in particular has been slowly climbing the ranks since as far back as 2021. That team would be Russia. A couple of years ago, they were known denizens of the lower seeds, but now have found themselves cultivating enough power to finally be a top seed. This steady rise could be attributed to the fact that they have an amazing national tournament scene, rife with competition in several different formats and rank brackets. The most notable series of them all is the X Project 4K tournament, in which a grand total of 54 entrants participated this year. Of the current MWC roster, each of them have placed at least 5th in either this or last year's edition, showing that Russia's tournament scene has been a good litmus test for scouting out potential MWC players. Speaking of the players, Riftoyu, Zeflin, and team captain Endoris are back again after getting upset by Indonesia in the quarterfinals last year, supported by newcomers Rinresk, Kapupa, and Depni. I would describe this assortment of players as hyper-physical with a knack for Rice, so if they're able to survive long enough to where the difficulty scaling tips in their favor, they might be the ones to surprise a couple of teams in the late game.
Let me take a trip down memory lane real quick. The year was 2021, and the US had just finished 2nd place heartbreakingly. Fast forward a few months, MWC was happening again, and there were rumors that the entirety of last year's team was leaving, and that the new team was just so much worse. But that year, they proved everybody wrong, being able to seed 11th and still finishing 3rd place overall, proving that the US should always be feared. This may sound similar if you know about the new Team USA. Doing a complete overhaul, fielding a roster of all new players with the exceptions being Minu and Dev. Team USA has once again proved that this country's talent is unmatched by placing 2nd overall this year in qualifiers, matching last year's result despite all the changes. And there's good reason for that. Starting off with the old heads, both Minu and Dev continue to show off just why they've been on this team for the past few years, top scoring multiple maps, such as the number 1 and number 2 score Dev had overall on Rice 2 and 3 respectively. The newbies are also looking extremely promising, especially the rising star Satora, who's been a starter on every single map so far, displaying immense consistency and even finished number 2 on Hybrid 1. This is the team of the tournament in my opinion. If you want to see some new stars rise to prominence, I would highly recommend to watch any one of these games just to watch this new roster go.
And that'll be it for the qualifier results. We're so happy to be back again this year to provide you with recaps every week. If you have any feedback, we welcome it with open arms. Thank you again to our guest commentators Sparky and EpicMan2, our script editors and researchers Case100 and RushFTK, and our video editor Normiplier. Congratulations and good luck to all of the teams who made it through qualifiers, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.